As I stared at the hotel receipt with my boss's name on it, my hands trembled. Not from sadness, but from the icy clarity of betrayal. The woman I had trusted most had not only been unfaithful, but she had also chosen him, the man who controlled my paycheck. That moment was the tipping point. I froze her credit cards, cleared out half of our joint account, and began executing a plan that would not only expose her lies, but also leave her wondering how she'd harmed me so much. But before diving into the full story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next one. The community center was a picture of holiday cheer, adorned with twinkling string lights and garlands of evergreen that filled the air with a faint, piney fragrance. The soft hum of festive music mixed with the laughter and chatter of neighbors and friends, creating a warm, inviting atmosphere. Long tables were lined with platters of cookies, pies, and carefully wrapped gifts, while a large Christmas tree stood proudly in the corner, its ornaments glittering under the soft golden light. She was at the heart of it all, radiant in her red dress, a vision of holiday spirit. Her smile was infectious as she flitted from group to group, her laughter lighting up every corner of the room. This party had been her idea, and she had poured her heart into making it perfect. I, however, couldn't quite match her enthusiasm. Crowds made my skin crawl, and small talk felt like an endless chore. Nursing a glass of punch near the edge of the room, I watched her glow with effortless ease. I couldn't deny her joy was magnetic, but something in me couldn't shake the irritation simmering beneath the surface. This was her world, not mine, and as much as I wanted to share in her happiness, I felt out of place. The evening unfolded with the gentle rhythm of clinking glasses and soft holiday music that seemed to float through the air. I remained anchored near the edge of the room, my drink cool against my palm as I traced the condensation on the glass with my thumb. The faint murmur of my coworkers' conversation filled the space around me, though I barely registered the words. My attention kept drifting to her. She was a force of nature in her element, her red dress flowing like liquid fire as she glided between groups. Each laugh, each tilt of her head, seemed perfectly designed to draw people in. She made it look so easy, charming everyone she met with a kind word or a quick, playful gesture. I envied her ability to light up a room like this, so effortless, so unforced. And yet I couldn't help but feel uneasy. Every so often, my eyes would flick to her from across the room. Not because I didn't trust her. At least, that's what I told myself. But because there was something about the way others looked at her. Men, in particular, lingered just a moment too long, their smiles holding a little too much admiration. My chest tightened, though I forced myself to focus on the conversation at hand. But the feeling didn't dissipate. Instead, it grew sharper with each passing moment. The room, warm and inviting just minutes before, now felt stifling. I couldn't pinpoint why, but something about her magnetic presence left me uneasy. It was as though I was watching a play unfold, but I wasn't part of the cast. Then, for a moment, I lost sight of her. My stomach twisted. I scanned the room, looking for her red dress in the sea of muted tones. There she was, by the dessert table, laughing with a group of friends. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. A shadow of doubt lingered at the edge of my mind, a nagging voice whispering that the night was far from over. The music shifted, transitioning to a slower, more intimate tune. The crowd moved like waves, couples swaying gently under the dimmed lights. I glanced toward the dessert table where I had last seen her, expecting her familiar silhouette to still be there. But she wasn't. Where is she? My eyes swept the room. Not by the tree. Not near the bar. Not anywhere I could see. A tightness gripped my chest as my gaze darted through the crowd, the festive warmth of the room suddenly feeling oppressive. I stepped forward, scanning faces and searching for that unmistakable red dress. Then I saw her. At the far end of the room, near the edge of the makeshift dance floor, she was swaying with someone. A man. He stood tall, his slicked back hair catching the light, his posture oozing smug confidence. My steps faltered as I took in the scene. His hands rested on her waist, holding her closer than necessary. And she wasn't pulling away. For a moment, I froze. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Was this some harmless joke? Was I misunderstanding? But then his hands began to slide lower, fingers grazing the curve of her hips with a boldness that made my stomach churn. My pulse quickened, heat rising in my chest. She smiled up at him, her lips curving softly as if nothing was amiss. My throat tightened. That smile wasn't forced. It wasn't the polite kind she used when humoring someone. It was warm, familiar. And that made it worse. The world seemed to blur around me. The clinking glasses, the quiet hum of conversation, even the music. All of it faded into a dull roar in the back of my mind. My focus narrowed to the two of them, to the way her body leaned into his, to the way he held her like he had every right to. My feet moved before I could stop them, carrying me toward them with slow, deliberate steps. Each one felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of what I was about to do pressed down on me. A storm was building inside, each step feeding the growing tension. This wasn't just a dance, it was something more. Something I couldn't ignore, and I wasn't about to let it slide. My steps quickened as I crossed the room, heat rising with each one. The music felt muffled, drowned out by the pounding in my ears. The closer I got, the more vivid the scene became, his smirk, her soft smile, their bodies swaying in a way that twisted my stomach. My jaw tightened, and before I could stop myself, the words escaped in a low, sharp growl. What the heck is going on here? The music didn't stop, but the space around us seemed to freeze. She turned her head slowly, almost lazily, meeting my eyes with a look that sent a fresh surge of anger through me. There wasn't a hint of guilt or embarrassment, just a calm, almost dismissive air that made my fists clench. "I promised him this dance," she said lightly, as if my presence was an afterthought. "You don't mind if I finish it, do you?" The man didn't miss a beat. His smirk deepened as his left hand slid an inch lower on her waist, his fingers now resting at a line that made my blood boil. It wasn't subtle, and it wasn't accidental. He wanted me to see. I stepped closer, my voice dropping but still cutting through the tension. "Get your hands off her." The man raised an eyebrow, his smirk unwavering. "Relax, man. It's just a dance." The audacity in his tone was the last straw. My hand shot out, grabbing him by the collar. His smirk vanished as I yanked him back with enough force to make her stumble slightly. Gasps rippled through the room, the quiet murmur of the crowd quickly turning to a shocked silence. "Hey," she snapped, steadying herself and glaring at me. "What is wrong with you?" "What's wrong with me?" I shot back, my voice rising. "He had his hands all over you, and you're asking, what's wrong with me?" The man struggled in my grip, his hands pushing against my arm. "Let go of me," he demanded, his bravado now laced with panic. I shoved him backward, sending him sprawling onto the floor. Glasses clinked, and a chair toppled over as he landed hard, the sound cutting through the stunned silence like a knife. All eyes were on us now, the festive atmosphere utterly shattered. She stepped forward, her voice sharp with irritation. "You're making a scene." I turned to her, incredulous. "I'm making a scene?" "You let him touch you like that, and I'm the one making a scene?" She crossed her arms, her calm veneer cracking just enough to show her defiance. It wasn't what it looked like. Before I could respond, murmurs began spreading through the crowd. The weight of dozens of eyes pressed down on me, their judgment thick in the air. But I didn't care. My focus was on her, the storm inside me refusing to abate. The man scrambled to his feet, brushing himself off and glaring at me, but he didn't say another word. He didn't have to. The damage was already done, and I knew this night wasn't over, not by a long shot. The tension in the room was palpable, every eye locked on us, as if waiting for the next explosion. She stood there, arms crossed, her chin lifted in defiance, radiating irritation instead of remorse. Her voice, calm but laced with annoyance, cut through the silence. "You're overreacting," she said, shaking her head. "It was just a dance." "Just a dance?" I repeated, my voice cracking under the weight of my anger. "You let him touch you like that, smiling at him, leaning into him, and you want to call that just a dance?" Her eyes narrowed, her tone clipped. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It wasn't anything serious." My chest heaved as I struggled to keep my voice steady. "Not serious? Do you even hear yourself? He had his hands all over you in front of everyone, and you didn't even care." She rolled her eyes, the dismissive gesture hitting me harder than her words. "I didn't care because it didn't mean anything. You're making a fool of yourself for no reason." The room felt stifling, the whispers and murmurs around us growing louder. I took a step closer, lowering my voice but making every word sharp enough to cut. "A fool? You think I'm a fool? Because that's what you've made me look like tonight, and—" Her expression hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line. "If you trusted me, this wouldn't even be an issue." Throwing the cobwebs away. "Trusted you?" I said, disbelief dripping from my words. "You're seriously playing the trust card right now? While you're out here letting some guy grope you like that?" Her cheeks flushed, but it wasn't shame, it was anger. She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Keep your voice down. You're embarrassing me." "Oh, now you care about embarrassment," I shot back, bitterness lacing every syllable. "Where was that concern 5 minutes ago?" The weight of the crowd's stares pressed on us, but I didn't care anymore. She turned away as if to end the conversation, her body language screaming dismissal. I reached out, grabbing her wrist, not harshly, but firmly enough to make her pause. "No," I said, my voice steady but ice cold. "We're not done here." She yanked her arm free, glaring at me with a mix of irritation and frustration. "Yes, we are. Not here. Not now." "Wait." Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. The sight of her back, retreating without a second glance, left me standing there, chest heaving, anger boiling over into helplessness. The party around me blurred, the festive atmosphere now a cruel mockery of the chaos inside me. I needed air. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the exit, the cold night waiting to swallow me whole. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but it did little to calm the fire raging inside. She followed a few moments later, her heels clicking against the pavement. When she stopped in front of me, her arms were crossed, her posture more irritated than apologetic. "What is wrong with you?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the quiet street. "You embarrassed me in there." I turned to face her, my hands clenching at my sides. "Embarrassed you? That's what you care about? Not what you did? Not what he said to me?" She rolled her eyes, the gesture sparking fresh anger in my chest. "I didn't do anything. You're being paranoid, making this into something it's not." "Paranoid?" I shot back, my voice trembling with disbelief. "That guy had his hands all over you, and you didn't stop him. He even had the nerve to smirk at me like I didn't matter, and you just stood there." Her silence was deafening, her gaze shifting to the side. The weight of it crushed me more than her words ever could. "Say something," I demanded, stepping closer. "Deny it. Tell me he was lying. Anything." "Yeah." But she didn't. Instead, she let out a long, exasperated sigh. "I'm not doing this with you," she muttered, her tone dismissive. "You're blowing this out of proportion, like you always do." Her words hit like a cold, hard truth. Something fundamental had shifted between us, and I could feel it in the empty space her silence left behind. The connection we once shared now felt like a thread fraying with every breath. She turned away, heading back toward the party without a backward glance. And for the first time, I didn't follow. The next morning, I sat in the quiet of our living room, her absence sharp and heavy, Anger still coursed through me, but it had cooled into something more focused. If there was one thing I couldn't let go of, it was doubt. I needed the truth, no matter how much it hurt. It didn't take long to uncover the cracks beneath the polished surface of our life. Her phone was the first clue, a series of late-night messages to unfamiliar numbers, the tone of the conversations unmistakably flirtatious. One text read, "Last night was incredible. Can't wait for next time." My stomach turned as I scrolled further, finding threads with more than one name. From there, the trail only deepened. Bank statements revealed receipts for dinners at upscale restaurants, dates I clearly hadn't attended, hotel bookings lined up suspiciously with her so-called business trips. The final blow came from her cloud storage, photos of her with other men, their intimacy undeniable. Each discovery was like a knife twisting deeper, confirming what I had feared but hadn't wanted to believe. But this wasn't just about the pain anymore. It was about regaining control. As the betrayal unfolded, so did my plan. First, I accessed our joint bank account, transferring half the balance into a new account under my name. It wasn't about greed. It was about ensuring I wasn't left stranded when the dust settled. Next, I methodically shifted all household utilities and shared subscriptions into her name. It was petty, sure, but I wanted her to feel the weight of responsibility she had so easily ignored. I collected every piece of evidence, compiling a folder of screenshots, receipts, and timestamps. The process wasn't just methodical, it was cathartic. Each piece added to my arsenal, proof that I hadn't imagined any of it, that the cracks weren't just in my mind. As I finished organizing the last of it, I leaned back in my chair, the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest. Yet beneath it was a new resolve. She had treated me like I was disposable, but she was about to learn that actions had consequences. This wasn't just about exposing the truth. It was about reclaiming my sense of self. And when the moment came, I would make sure she understood exactly what she had done. The evening began like so many others, the house glowing with soft, warm light, and the aroma of roasted dishes wafting from the kitchen. She flitted between guests with her signature grace, wearing a polished smile that masked any trace of the tension between us. Every detail was immaculate, from the perfectly set table to her practiced laugh echoing in the room. She was the perfect hostess, and no one would have guessed the storm brewing beneath the surface. I played my part well, mingling just enough to avoid suspicion. My smile was measured, my words carefully chosen. I watched her as she charmed our friends, seemingly unaware of what was coming. The room buzzed with conversation, laughter spilling over like the wine being poured. But in the back of my mind, I was counting down the minutes, waiting for dessert. Finally, the moment arrived. The plates of sweets were set on the table, glasses refilled, and the room settled into a comfortable lull. I stood slowly, raising my glass with a practiced smile. The attention shifted to me, curiosity flickering in their eyes. "I'd like to say a few words," I began, my tone warm and steady. She glanced at me, surprised but pleased. I could see her pride in the way she tilted her head slightly, her charm on full display. "First, thank you all for coming tonight. It's always wonderful to share an evening with such good friends." The guests murmured in agreement, raising their glasses in a soft cheer. I let the silence linger just a second too long before continuing. "And I'd especially like to thank my wife," I said, turning toward her. Her smile brightened, but I could see the faintest flicker of unease in her eyes, for reminding me of the importance of honesty in a marriage. The room grew quieter, the tension palpable. I tapped my phone, and the TV behind me lit up. The first image appeared, a screenshot of her messages with one of her lovers. Gasps rippled through the room as the evidence scrolled, texts, photos, receipts, each one louder than words. Her face drained of color, her composure crumbling in real time. "What the hell are you doing?" she hissed, her voice low and panicked. "Just showing everyone the truth," I said coldly, my smile now sharp and unyielding. The whispers grew louder, some friends turning to stare at her, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. She stood abruptly, reaching for the remote, but I stepped between her and the TV. "Don't bother," I said flatly. "The damage is done." I set my glass down and grabbed my coat, my voice cutting through the chaos as I headed for the door. "Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. I know I will." Then I walked out, leaving her to face the wreckage she had built with her own hands. The days that followed the dinner party felt surreal, like the closing act of a play I had rehearsed in my mind for too long. The morning after, I went straight to my lawyer's office and filed for divorce. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. The weight I had been carrying for months, years, even began to lift as the paperwork was signed. I took only what belonged to me, leaving behind the furniture, the trinkets, the life we had built together. It wasn't mine anymore, and I didn't want it. Moving into a small downtown apartment felt strangely liberating. The space was modest, but it was mine. A blank slate where I could start again. For the first time in years, I woke up without the crushing anxiety of wondering what lie I might uncover next. There was peace in the simplicity of it. No shared responsibilities, no constant sense of betrayal. Just quiet mornings, my own thoughts, and the freedom to shape my own life. Meanwhile, the consequences of her actions unraveled like threads pulled from an intricate fabric. Word spread quickly through our social circle. The evidence I had shown at the dinner party made its rounds, whispered over coffee, and exchanged in hushed phone calls. Her friends, once eager to bask in her charm, now distanced themselves. Invitations stopped. The same community that had once adored her now turned cold, their judgment casting her into isolation. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she struggled to keep up appearances. The radiant, confident woman I had known seemed to fade. Her carefully curated image was shattered, and with it, the network of people she had relied on. There was no public apology, no attempt to reach out, just silence. I didn't revel in her downfall. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming what I had lost. My self-respect, my independence, my sense of worth. As the weeks turned into months, I focused on rebuilding, finding joy in the small victories, a new job, new hobbies, new connections. Looking back, I didn't see her downfall as my triumph. It was simply the natural consequence of her choices. For me, the real victory was stepping out of her shadow and finally finding myself again. In the quiet moments of my new life, I often found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the anger, the humiliation. It had all felt insurmountable at the time, a tidal wave threatening to pull me under. But now, standing on the other side of it, I saw it for what it truly was. A chapter that needed to end so a new one could begin. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely, of course. Some nights the memories crept in, sharp and uninvited. Her laughter at the party, the smirk on his face, the suffocating sense of being a fool. But with each passing day, those moments lost their power over me. They became lessons instead of wounds, reminders of what I would never tolerate again. What surprised me most was the clarity that followed. For years, I had bent myself into shapes I thought would make her happy, ignoring my own needs and instincts. Her betrayal wasn't just the loss of trust. It was the shattering of an illusion I had been complicit in maintaining. And in its place, I found something unexpected: myself. Moving forward wasn't about revenge or proving a point. It was about rediscovering the things that made me whole. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. I reconnected with old friends, people who reminded me of the person I used to be before I had compromised so much. I even adopted a dog, a scrappy mutt with mismatched ears and an endless capacity for joy. He became a symbol of my new beginning, unperfect, unpolished, but deeply, unapologetically alive. As for her, I didn't hold on to the bitterness. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. What mattered now was the path ahead, not the one we had left behind. Life, I realized, was too short to carry the weight of someone else's mistakes. In the end, I wasn't the same person who had walked into that party. I was stronger, wiser, and above all, free. And as I looked out the window of my apartment at the city lights twinkling like stars, I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. The future wasn't certain, but for the first time in a long time, it was mine to shape.